It's really important that teachers have boundaries set up to where they can refresh and rejuvenate and nourish themselves and get some time and distance.
Welcome to a new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. We're finishing up the year strong with some interviews, some solo episodes, and some ideas that you can take into 2024. If you're joining us in November and December, wishing you a great finish to the calendar year. If you're listening to this episode later on in the school year, welcome. Appreciate you stopping by. If we haven't met before, my name is Monica Burns. I'm a former New York City public school teacher, still here on the East Coast, and love to share my favorite tips, tricks, and strategies for technology integration. In this podcast episode, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. I started the podcast in 2019, and each episode is designed to give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Don't forget to head to classtechtips.com/podcast for the show notes for each and every episode. This episode is sponsored by my free ebook of ChatGPT prompts for educators. Do you want 60 plus prompts at your fingertips? Grab my free ebook of prompts that you can use with any chatbot, including but not limited to ChatGPT. It's ready for you to try now. You can snag the PDF at classtechtips.com/chatgptbook or DM me on Instagram at Class Tech Tips if you're on the go today, and I'll get you the download link ASAP. These AI writing prompts are perfect for educators looking to give chatbots a whirl. Don't miss out on this freebie resource that will surely save you time this school year. This week's episode is titled Tech Tips for Teacher Wellness with Meredith Boullion, and it was so much fun chatting with Meredith for today's episode. The idea of teacher wellness isn't brand new, but the tech connection is really what stood out for me when I came across Meredith's work. She has a new book for ISTE all about this topic. We talk about that in today's episode, but she gives some tips that you can put into practice right away, even some mindset shifts that you might bring back to your colleagues this year. So let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the Easy EdTech podcast, Meredith. I am so excited to chat with you today about the very important topic of teacher wellness. But before we dive into all of that, would love for listeners to hear a little bit about your role in education. What does your day-to-day look like?
Well, thanks for having me, Monica. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about the book with me. I am a district technology facilitator in Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana. We are in the very southwest corner of the state. And in my role, I get to support teachers throughout the district with the integration of technology to support student learning goals. And so I get to visit with teachers in their classrooms and support them and help them with integration. I also get to help write some online courses and facilitate webinars to deliver content for them. So I am in touch with them on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I bet hearing kind of all the things from them, which is one of the reasons why I'm excited to chat with you today, just to hear the different perspectives that you're coming across, the different experiences that you are having. And today we're talking about teacher wellness. So can you start by, so important. So can you start by sharing a bit about your inspiration behind writing a book focused on tech and teacher wellness?
Yeah, I'll tell you that after the pandemic, like so many other school districts and school systems, we found ourselves, coming off of a very difficult and challenging circumstance. And it was my experience, and I think the experience of many other people in education, that, you're dealing with a whole new sense of trauma, of maybe some loss. And when we come back into the classroom, teachers had to care for their students and the emotions that they were going through. And without a doubt, the social emotional learning aspect of education was really at the forefront. And so teachers were really, encouraged to and felt the need to care for their students in that way. And I think that with teachers, oftentimes we put other people, educators, we put other people ahead of ourselves oftentimes, and not grudgingly in any way, but just because that's the nature of what we do. We're helpers. We want to teach and we want to help. And I noticed that a lot of the teachers in our district were tired. They weren't as enthusiastic as participating in professional development in the ways that we had structured it in the past. They're a little more reluctant, maybe overwhelmed is a better word. We had, due to a lot of the federal funding from the ESSER waves of funding that came through, there was a lot of extra technology. Now in the district, we went from having a lot of devices to one-to-one. And that shift in and of itself, coupled with the emotional needs of their class, was extraordinarily stressful. So we had teachers who were not only learning how to deal with this whole new emotional landscape in the classroom, but also in the technological landscape of integrating technology in meaningful ways.
So there's just all of these things going on, right? And I think that for many listeners, they've either had a similar experience themselves or they're supporting educators who are voicing, right, similar concerns or having similar feelings. The digital age, right? All of the things that we have access to. I'm talking to you from my office today where not only do I have 2 cups of something to drink, right? Like my warm tea and my not as cold, used to be ice water, but I have 4 screens here, right? Between my iPad, my phone, and I've got the microphone, I've got the extra, there's just so much stuff here, right? That we are interacting with in this digital age. So why do you believe it's crucial for educators to set boundaries at a time like this, during this digital age, if you will? What is one of your top tips for them as they try to set boundaries?
Well, having access to information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is also, it's overstimulating. And I think it's really important that teachers have boundaries set up to where they can refresh and rejuvenate and nourish themselves and get some time and distance between a mental barrier between the concerns of the day and to be able to relax, really, to essentially unplug and be able to have time to take care of themselves. It's so important that they prioritize time to care for themselves.
And that, putting things in perspective there, right? Like setting those priorities. And I think even just acknowledging that this increased access is positive in certain ways, right? And we're on video today, right? So I'm like, I've got my, my pincher fingers out here, right? Like there's certain ways, but it's not necessarily going to, right, solve everything. It might create other problems, right, that we just didn't have before. So, thinking more about this, topic and this connection between digital spaces and teacher wellness, how do you think that constant connectivity and this influx of information can impact an educator's well-being?
Well, I think that we have all grown accustomed to the immediacy of information. And I think that there's no way that a human being can keep up with some of the demands that are often put upon us. I know in a classroom when students take a test, often the parents or the students themselves expect immediate feedback. And when you're teaching 130 students and you're grading 130 assessments, it's impossible for you to be able to, be right on it. For those of us who are type A, who don't like to have any notifications in our inbox, when we clean out our notifications, it's especially grueling and it can be a lot. And so I think it's very important that teachers evaluate where they are and they recognize where some of those stressors may lie and that they look for some solutions and for some strategies that can help them.
Yeah. And it's such a great point you made about that immediacy, right? And we all have this tendency to say, like, why has this person not emailed me back? Or I'm sure they have their phone, right? Why haven't I gotten an answer to this question? It doesn't even seem like a big deal, right? Like, we just expect that everyone is on. And sometimes I know, I try to be reflective of my own practice. Like, am I projecting that to people, right? That I could answer an email at any moment, right? Or that I am that available, right, to respond to something, as I think about, right, I try not to email someone back on the weekends, or if I am doing that little bit of work, then perhaps, right, I schedule that to go out Monday morning so it doesn't hit their inbox on a Saturday, or they don't think I'm always available, right, on a Saturday either. So as we are, right, looking at all of these ways that we want to support teacher wellness, how do collaborative tools help teachers break out of the isolation that sometimes comes with a profession?
Within education, we naturally by nature gravitate toward other teachers in the same grade level, of the same interests. And I think that being able to, whether you are in a rural community or whether you are in a large school district with a lot of teachers in the same grade level or in the content area that you're in, the ability to connect digitally is important, because I think that when you can collaborate and have things in common with other educators, you definitely don't feel as alone. You might have some of the same situations happening with some personalities in the classroom. And teachers are very generous with what works, right? They like to share what's been helpful for them.
And I would imagine, as you're thinking about teacher wellness and making sure everyone feels good, isn't too overwhelmed, or, feel supported as well, right? There's probably people that come into your inbox, right, emailing you about this, or finding you in a hallway, or it comes up in a meeting, right? For educators who might be overwhelmed by the idea of integrating more tech or new tech, right, or abandoning something they kind of loved, but we're not using in a district anymore, right? Even if they're bringing more tech in for their own wellness, let's say, what advice would you give to someone who might feel overwhelmed with this idea of more tech in their lives?
Well, I would say that it's just take a step back, take a deep breath, and to not necessarily think of it as the addition of tech, but try to consider the ways that you might be able to manage the tech that you have better so that it is less stressful and it causes less distress.
I like that idea of just saying, like, maybe I'm not optimizing this tool, or instead of bringing in something new, like maybe there's a tool that's already in my tool belt that can help me accomplish that task. I think about that a lot when I do a lot of workshops that are, 15 ways or 10 tools for, right? And I love those. And I think they serve a big purpose of introducing, right, educators to new things. That's why I do them. But I always start off with that caveat that I might give an example that's interesting, but you could already do with a different tool, right? So I think that is something that's important to, we always want to feel like we're up on the new thing, or we're ready and down to try something new. But sometimes that new thing is just a new way of looking at something that we've always done.
Absolutely. And, something else too is that I think that tech companies have become super responsive to requests. Like a lot of times whenever I know that, for example, with Microsoft, when you go in and you request certain features, you can vote certain things. And so they're listening to the users. And so if teachers think, well, boy, I wish this tool would do this, absolutely let that be known, because you just never know what sort of things can be done in the tech that we use to make things easier and better.
That's such a great point, especially for EdTech companies. Like, I think sometimes we take, because we're users of tools, right? We sometimes take for granted the fact that one EdTech company even knows about a really great feature in another tool. And maybe there is some overlap there. So Mary, I want to make sure we talk a bit about your new book and make sure people know all about it. So, what's a key takeaway that you hope educators gain from your work, right? From your new book, and something that they could implement in their journey towards greater well-being?
Well, I think that one of the first tips that's shared in the book, well, first of all, there are quite a few tips, and I don't think that anybody expects someone to adopt a single strategy that's in there, because definitely it's a pick and choose sort of book where you can go through and find the ones that are that seem the most beneficial for you, and you can sort of customize your experience as you go through and learn about some things that maybe you haven't considered. One of the main things I think that is super important that I would say is to guard your cell phone number. I think that maintaining a sense of privacy and division, it's part of that whole establishing boundaries idea as well, where, you may have the best intentions in the beginning of your career or even at any point in your career, and you might willingly give somebody your information, and then, that can spread exponentially. Mm-hmm. And so when you're 3, 5, 7, 10 years in, you've given a lot of yourself, and it's hard to pull back. It's hard to establish. So I think if you can start, by establishing some boundaries and with respect, it's by no means am I saying, you should not accept phone calls or texts from people, but to certainly consider the time that you're spending maybe addressing those sorts of messages outside of school hours.
That's such a great tip, because I do think it's tempting to do something like that, right? It could feel easier in the moment also, right? Like for you, it might feel like, oh, this is just a quick way, but it could have those longer term impacts, right? And I know, if I'm in that position, sometimes I'll tell people like, text message is really, it seems like the best way to get in touch with me, but it's not. So like, I'm going to miss that. I'm going to read it. I'm going to forget to respond.
Right.
It's not the way that I can keep track of things, right? I need it to be in this other place, right?
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Right. It's partly that boundary, but it's also, it can be the best way to serve someone too, right? If that's really where, your heart is in terms of navigating all of those boundaries, to be your 100%. Best self, a few different things.
Absolutely.
So I want to make sure that anyone who's listening in today knows where to connect with you, knows where to learn more about the book. I'm going to link out so anyone who's listening on their phone right now can, click on the links in the description and all of that. But for someone who's maybe on the move or listening in and they're making that just mental bookmark, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
Well, first of all, they could reach out by email, and my name is just meredith.boullion@gmail.com. Also, I have an X account, and I have Instagram, and they are both at Real, REAL, Tech for Ed.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Meredith, for sharing such actionable information, some great things for people to bring up in conversations with their colleagues too. I can't wait for everyone to check out your book and learn more about what you're up to.
It has been great talking with you, Monica. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It was so much fun chatting with Meredith today and learning more about her work and talking about how to address teacher wellness in the digital age. So let's finish up this episode like we always do with a few key points. Set boundaries with your technology interactions. Keep things off limits, like your cell phone number. Revisit tools in your tool belt instead of adding something new. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from this episode, including all of the ways to connect with Meredith, by going to classtechtips.com/podcast and finding today's episode number 240. This episode is sponsored by my free ebook of ChatGPT prompts for educators. Do you want 60 plus prompts at your fingertips? Grab my free ebook of prompts that you can use with any chatbot, including but not limited to ChatGPT. It's ready for you to try now. You can snag the PDF at classtechtips.com/chatgptbook or DM me on Instagram at classtechtips if you're on the go today, and I'll get you the download link ASAP. These AI writing prompts are perfect for educators looking to give chatbots a whirl. Don't miss out on this freebie resource that will surely save you time this school year. Thanks again for tuning in to another Tuesday episode of the Easy EdTech podcast, Whether you've been here for the first 200 or so episodes or tuning in for the first time today, so glad you stopped by. Make sure to hit that follow button on your podcast app. That way, next week's new episode will be waiting for you first thing Tuesday morning. I also have some bonus episodes on the schedule for the next few months that I know you'll want to check out too.